It's the end of an era as universities start to evaluate how they will attract another diverse student body in the midst of the U.S. Supreme Court possibly striking down affirmative action in universities. Why does this matter? Why should race even be considered a factor in higher education? These are all questions that the Supreme Court and the nation have to answer. But is the future of higher education and the future of our country at stake? As colleges brace for the end of affirmative action, where do we go from here? This is E.W. Claville, and this is the next Claville Report Synopsis. Hi, it's the Claville Report, and I'm E.W. Claville. Today we're going to talk about how colleges are bracing for the possible end of affirmative action. As relates to college admissions, because of past discrimination, universities have developed programs over the past several decades in order to attract and also help to repair the ills of the wrongs of the past as it relates to diverse student bodies. Now, what does that mean? We'll start to unpack that a little, but we'll also look at the future, look at what the Supreme Court is forecast to do coming up in this session. So let's take a look at what affirmative action is. In our country, it's no secret that discrimination against all individuals except white males stopped and hindered positive progression in our country, or what we call the American dream, right? So in other words, race and gender was used as a discriminatory effect when it comes to hiring practices, where you live, whether you could purchase various items, where you could borrow money. You've heard of redlining, but also in higher education. Now, in higher education, if you're a white male at that particular time, and for the most part, the vast majority of our country, then you could have the opportunity in order to attend university. You wouldn't be discriminated against because you were white or you're a male. However, all others outside of that particular narrow group were discriminated against. In other words, African Americans, slaves at the time, then newly freed slaves, and then African Americans could not receive admissions to certain schools. Women also could not receive admissions to certain schools. Native Americans, and then the many, many other diverse groups of our country. So at the end of the modern civil rights movement, various programs to help repair the wrongs of the past were created. One of those was called affirmative action. Now, I've been on record, and I'll say it here again, that I believe affirmative action was the wrong name for it. I understand the reasoning, but I believe that corrective action should have been the proper and the better constructive name. Why corrective action? Because it was simply meant to correct the wrongs of the past. So one aspect of affirmative action is that individuals that were historically discriminated against were actually put into policy in order to be actively recruited, in order to, again, bring them into the institutions, allow them opportunity to have jobs and the like. Well, immediately, over the course of years, actually a couple of decades after affirmative action programs started to take root, the concept of reverse discrimination took hold. And basically that was the idea that individuals who were white males and white in general felt discriminated against if they didn't receive admissions over someone non-white or someone black or someone Hispanic, whatever the case may be. So they felt that their indicators were better, they should have that particular seat. Well, that started to take root, and that became a rallying point for the detractors of affirmative action. And what ended up happening is that little by little, whether it's the Bakke case, whether it's the University of Michigan case, University of Michigan Law School case, and others, University of Texas case, those started to chip away at affirmative action in higher education. So now, in this Supreme Court session, University of North Carolina, Harvard University, their practices on how they admit students, both in a private institution, Ivy League, public institution, is slated to be eliminated or deemed to be unconstitutional. So what's happening, and why does this matter? According to an article by Axios, it says that colleges are reevaluating long-standing hallmarks of admissions process as they try to figure out how to attract diverse student bodies in a world without affirmative action. The article goes on to say, why does it matter? The Supreme Court, in its perceived ruling, is widely expected to rule later this year that schools can't explicitly consider applicants' race. So trying to achieve the ends, you have to achieve it through other means. Well, what does that mean? According to a professor at College of Education, University of Maryland, that says institutions are now scrambling. So what are some of the tactics that institutions will try to utilize in order to attract diverse student bodies? Standardized tests. They may be on the chopping block if schools can't take students' race into account. Why does this matter? Well, when you take a look at indicators and take a look at various tests that are taken in different regions of the country, there's an imbalance there, and many experts have spoken about that. So you have what universities are starting to look at what's called the whole student. So they take in consideration their race, their socioeconomic status, which impacts performance, right? If you're in a household of 7 people, 2 parents, 5 other children, you're living in the inner city, resources are limited, and you perform and you're in school with a 3.5, and you have someone who lives in the suburbs, 2-parent household, and only 1 of 2 children with massive resources in a private school, and you have a GPA of 3.7, who's the better student? You look at the whole student. So let's go back to this standardized test. The pandemic fast track, according to this article, some university decision to scrap standardized testing requirements, which has been a barrier, of course, to lower income students. I noticed in law schools started to scrap the LSAT for professional school. And again, started looking at the whole student. Will this be a game changer for individuals trying to gain admissions to the institution? I believe so. I believe it's going to be a major game changer because, again, it's going to give universities admissions offices an opportunity to, again, evaluate all the background and the aspect that students have to come through in order just to make it to college. I mean, think about when you were in college, the challenges that you had, the obstacles you had to overcome. Maybe some of you were the first generation going to college. I know I was the first to graduate in my family from college, but all of us went to college. And after that, many others graduated. But still, those are obstacles that many people face that some do not. And when they don't face those obstacles, that means they perform a little better. Does that mean that that's unfair? The answer is no. It simply means that you have to consider everyone's background to give them an equitable opportunity. And this is what affirmative action has always been about, an equitable opportunity to succeed. That's it. In other words, put us on the same track. Give us the same equipment. Put no barriers in front of us and may the best person win the race. That's it. That's all affirmative action wants to do. So let's take another look at what is being said about undergraduate admissions. All right. According to the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Connecticut, according to this article, they're particularly concerned that a ruling eliminating race-conscious admissions can undermine the school's ability to understand important parts of a student's background. In other words, he says an applicant's race is so connected to so many aspects of their life and their experiences in their background, they worry the impact on their holistic view and getting full picture of the applicant, again, could be impacted. So how do schools refocus? So their recruitment efforts, according to this article, have to focus on certain areas, looking more at the socioeconomic background, as I stated previously, of the student to still get a full picture for that particular applicant. When you start to look at the whole student again, it's an opportunity to understand their story. What's your story? It's got to be a story of achievement, but not achievement with some adversity. Maybe it's a story of great overcoming just to be where you are. But that's the key, the whole student. Understanding who they are, where they come from, for an equitable opportunity to achieve. The article goes on to put in context what diversity is. Diversity suffered at schools that previously had to abandon affirmative action. So let's look at what will happen once this anticipated ruling comes down. Again, this is not the ruling yet. I personally thought, along with other constitutional law scholars, that way before this, in the Texas case, they were going to strike down affirmative action, but they didn't. The court didn't. But with the major conservative arm of it now, it is believed that this is going to happen. So what happened in Michigan? What happened in California with the ban on affirmative action? According to this article, Black undergraduate enrollment at the University of Michigan dropped tremendously from 7% in 2006 to just 4% in 2021. 3% of the school's population of African Americans are actually Black undergraduate students, plummeted after that ruling. California, when they banned race preferences admissions in 1986, by the fall of 2006, 10 years, there were just 96, not 96%, 96 Black freshmen at UCLA. Not even 100 in Los Angeles, the city of angels. Couldn't find 100 Black people to be a part of UCLA. Go figure. I'm not sure if that takes into account that athletes. Probably not. But bottom line, what's the bottom line? According to this article, it says diversity is so important to the student experience overall at universities that they're all just sitting and waiting, having these internal conversations on campuses to really think about what their strategy is going to be to achieve that diversity. A diverse room, a diverse thought process, a diverse community, diverse is good. Diversity is good. How do you achieve it? That's the discussion. But make no mistake about it, there have been historical wrongs in this country against people of color. Period. That's factual. You can't change that. How do you now correct that? You got to have that conversation. If race was used to exclude, race has to be used to include. It's just as simple as that. This has been another Claville Synopsis. We'll see you next time.